everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Ray, and today is a very special episode of the Weird and Wacky with Mr. Ray. Say hi, Mr. Ray.
Hi, Mr. Ray.
Thanks. So, welcome. If this is your first time, this is the episode where we are diamond painting. Well, I'm diamond painting, and James is telling us a story, and it could be anything. But today is going to be all Halloween related because Halloween's coming up.
Yay!
I'm so excited. We've been we literally were talking about this during our date last week. The whole date.
That's true.
It's true. So everything that you see here is going to be listed down below in the description box. If you'd like to get anything that you see, I've got needle minders, you can barely see them, or cover minders, if you want to call them that, here to the side and everything. But I'll have them all listed down below because we just want to jump right into this story. Is this the story of Samhain?
It is the story of Samhain, yeah.
And would you say that Samhain is a Scottish holiday?
No, it's an Irish one.
Okay.
It's definitely an Irish one.
Yeah.
Why, are people saying it's Scottish?
Yeah.
They try and take everything.
Sorry, Scots.
No, it definitely is an Irish one, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm intrigued. Because we were just talking about how, on the radio, they're saying, people are going to pumpkin patches for the first time. It's a brand new thing that it's, and it's something that I grew up with. But so Halloween is celebrated differently here, or it's respected differently here.
It was definitely, it's definitely become more Americanized as time has gone on, you know. I remember when you used to go around doing the trick-or-treating thing, but people will give you money.
That sounds like a better deal.
It really is, yeah. It's so people will give you money, and I remember we were about maybe 14 one time, and we were let's just put on some clothes, put on some, get dressed up in a costume.
Yeah. And
go around and knock on doors and see how much money we can make.
Yeah.
And we did it, and all that, about 80% of the people were giving us, sweets, which in America they would call candy, but we would call it sweets. So they were giving us sweets, and we were so annoyed because we wanted that cold hard cash, you know.
What, do you think I dressed up like this just to get some candy?
Yeah, and I was speaking to a friend of mine in the parking lot of a
what would you call it?
We would call it a car park.
You can use your words.
I was speaking to someone in the car park, a friend of mine in the car park of a supermarket, and she said that she was taking the kids to a pumpkin plot, and I was like, wow. So I guess all these things just they transfer over. But originally, Samhain would have moved from Ireland to the States, you know.
Right.
In probably about the 19th century.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hear it. Tell us what you know.
I guess just a few notes. A lot of what I'm going to talk about was written down in the kind of late medieval period, and up to that point there would have been an oral tradition.
Right.
So then when it gets written down, it's often Christianized, you know.
Right.
To fit it into a kind of Christian cosmology or whatever.
Yes.
So there's this book from the 11th century called the Lower Gawala Éireann, which is the Book of Invasions of Ireland.
Yes.
And what it does is it recounts 6 waves of invasion in Ireland, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the races that invade Ireland and make it their home, are from the Bible. And then other ones are from classical Greek sources.
Okay.
And then the 5th race that invade Ireland are the Tua de Danann.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the people of the goddess Donna. Tua means tribe.
Okay.
So, and then...
tribe of Donna.
They're the tribe of Donna, yeah. And Donna is a goddess. She's like the mother goddess, if you will.
Okay.
So I guess that's it. The other notes then is, if you are familiar with Irish mythology and stuff like that, I have taken elements of other stories and roll them all into this story, because I'm trying to tell
into this explanation of
yeah, exactly. And I've taken incidences from other legends and rolled them into this one to make it more dramatic, really, and try and give you a feel for where it comes from, you know.
yes.
So please don't go bananas at me if you're familiar with Irish mythology.
If something is a little bit off.
Yeah, I've done this for dramatic purposes.
Yes.
So the two they done in anyway are this magical race of people, and so they invade Ireland. They beat the Firbolg, who were the previous race that were there. They have a lot of fights with the Formordians, and then they end up ruling Ireland. And they're magical.
Okay, but who are the Formordians?
The Formordians were like a race of kind of brutish sea raiding types, you know, almost like the Vikings or something like that. But they appear in the mythology as well. Like,
okay, so the magical people, they overthrow the Viking people.
they overthrow the Firbolg. That's not important. Like at the start of our story, they're ruling Ireland, yeah.
Okay.
And as I said, they're magical people. Okay, so it's not very far from where we're sitting right now. Maybe about 20 kilometers from where we're sitting. It's about 4,000 years ago.
Southwest of Ireland.
The southwest of Ireland, 4,000 years ago, and it's a very foggy day.
Okay.
And 4 boats are sailing up from Galicia in Spain, in northern Spain. And the fog descends as they're heading to the beach, and it's very difficult for them to find their way.
Okay.
There's 4 sons of Mill on board, and there's also their like advisor, legal guy, medicine man type character called Morrigan.
Right.
Okay? So they manage to get through the fog, and they beach their boats, and then they jump out, and it's just very like the start of an episode of Vikings. You can just see them hopping off the boat. They've got axes. They're all wearing chainmail, you know? Yeah. All of them. They're coming. They're going to take this land, you know?
Right.
And Morrigan jumps off the boat with them. He's not wearing the same kind of gear with the chainmail and the leather armor and stuff. He's just wearing ordinary robes because Morrigan fights with his mind. So the 4 sons of Mill and Morrigan start walking up the beach, you know, towards the country. And out of the mist, they see these 3 characters, these 3 women standing on the beach. And as they approach them, one of the women walks forward and she says, I am Eru, you know, I am of this land that stretches out to the sea and the mountains that reach up to the sky. And if you can promise that you will worship me, then I can help you. I can help you with this conquest here.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And make you a deal that you cannot refuse.
Exactly, yeah. And Morrigan says, yeah, I think we can do that. We can honor your name if you give us a hand. And then another woman steps forward, and her name is Bamba. And she says, I'm Bamba. I'm of the sea that laps against the shore. If you honor my name, then I will help you take this land. And Morrigan says, I don't see any problem with that. I think we can do that. And then a third woman, their sisters, steps forward and says, I'm Fodla. I'm of the sky that reaches down to caress the mountains. If you honor my name, then I can help you take this land.
Nice.
Yeah. These 3 women, Eru, Bamba, and Fodla, they're members of the Tuatha Dé Danann.
Oh.
But they know that the age of magic is coming to an end.
Okay.
And that the age of men, that's starting to rise.
Yes.
And they can feel the magic start to lose its grip on the country.
It's waning.
It's waning, like their power is waning, you know?
Yeah.
So they cut this deal on the beach. And these 3 characters together...
because, of course, like, if you honor my name with the oral tradition, like, you keep passing this down through the generations, the story of us.
Yeah.
Then we will continue to live in a sort of way. Maybe.
Yeah, there's elements of that without a doubt. But
anyway, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, without getting into it too much, like so these, like one of these women, this is a thing in Celtic mythology called a Trinity deity, and it affects deities that are women, you know.
Just women?
Yeah, just women, as far as I know. So female deities will have 3 separate faces, but they'll manifest differently as well because of the magic.
Interesting.
Yeah, like they'll have the 3 forms, you know, like the maiden, the crone, and you know that
Mother.
kind of, yeah, exactly, the maiden, mother, and crone. Like,
yeah,
they'll also manifest in different. They can also manifest physically different depending on which goddess they are, you know.
yeah.
But essentially, they make this deal because they can feel the magic leaving the land.
Okay.
You know? So anyway, that's the southwest corner of Ireland. Yeah, and up in the northeast corner of Ireland, Conor MacNassa, the King of Ulster, is having a feast.
Okay.
And he's having a feast to celebrate the new year.
Yeah.
He has one every year, and he invites all of the, you know, lords and earls and stuff that are under him up to his castle, and they have a big feast.
Okay.
And this year, everybody's talking about Cruanach, because last time Cruanach was here, last year, his wife had passed away,
Okay.
and things were not going well for him.
Right.
You know,
Right.
he was eaten up by grief. His lands weren't as productive. He didn't have his eye on the ball. But now, here he is, with this beautiful red-haired woman.
Oh, he came to the feast with her.
He came to the feast with this beautiful red-haired woman who's young enough to be his daughter.
Oh, that's a problem. Okay.
Yeah. And she is heavily pregnant.
Oh, snap.
So they're at the feast, and they're feasting and drinking and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it comes to the part of the feast where they have to boast about things. So Conor MacNassa starts and says that he has the most productive cows in the whole place. The amount of milk he gets, you wouldn't even, like, seriously, you wouldn't even know about it.
Fill a swimming pool.
Yeah. And then it comes to Cruanach, and he goes, or Cronach, sorry, and he says that Macha, the woman with him, is the fastest woman in the whole country.
Oh.
Like, you have no idea. She can run faster than the wind, you know? And anyway, Conor MacNassa says, that's hardly likely, like. And then he goes, you have no idea, like, she can run so fast. All the time she's pulling on his sleeve telling him, shut up, you know? Anyway, more mead,
You've had too much to drink.
Yeah.
Shut up.
That's the way it goes, like, more mead, more boasting, right?
Right.
So he's eventually, anyway, Conor says he's had enough, you know? And he says, all right, if she's the fastest woman here, you know, and she can beat anyone in a race, then she's going to have a race right here, right now.
Yeah.
And then she says, I'm 8 months pregnant. I'm not racing anyone.
You can.
And then he said, yeah. And then he says, well, you're racing someone, or you're making him a liar and he's dying.
What? That is hardly fair.
Yeah, that's hardly fair. But he's the king, and that's the way it goes.
She's not drinking.
No, she's not. So, anyway, eventually she's forced into this race.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Except Conor MacNassa is kind of lying a little bit.
He has a plan.
He has a plan. He wants her to race the fastest horse and chariot that he has.
Okay.
So he takes the chariot out and he
But
starts...
that's not fair. I mean, a horse and chariot versus a person.
None of this is fair. So they come out and they get to the starting line, you know? And he's got his horse and chariot there. But the chariot's been stripped of everything. Seats, the wooden surrounds around it.
That's cheating.
It's literally just a crossbeam and a rope on it, you know, and a guy standing on the crossbeam. So there's this 8-month pregnant lady, yeah?
Yeah.
And she's queuing up.
Right.
She's at the starting line waiting for the pistol. And they've got the chariot against her. And she races the chariot. And it doesn't look good for her at the start. But then she pulls way ahead.
Okay.
And she does a final sprint and gets across the line and beats the chariot.
But
she's 8 months pregnant.
yeah.
So she goes into labour at the finishing line. And she miscarries 2 children.
Oh.
A boy called Truth and a girl called Modesty.
Oh.
And she's there anyway, and she's dying.
Mm-hmm.
And our Conor McNassa comes up and says, you know, well done, you really are the fastest woman in all of Ireland. And she says, Conor McNassa, I will make you 2 promises for my dead children.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that the men of Ulster will be the most fearsome fighting force in the land.
Mm.
They will be powerful and strong, and they will never be defeated.
Mm.
Except when you are in your hour of most need, that's when they will not be there for you.
Oof.
And she dies.
Oh.
And they call the fort that she died at
Yeah.
Vaca.
Vaca.
Vaca, yeah, after her. So that's the story.
Wow, there is nothing like a woman scorned.
Mm-hmm. Now, many years later,
Mm-hmm.
Conor McNassa is on top of his the walls of his keep, you know?
Yeah.
And he's looking out. And, oh my God, what is that over there? It's Queen Maeve of Connacht.
Mm.
And Queen Maeve of Connacht is coming to take his cows.
Oh.
Remember those cows with all the milk?
Yep. Loads of milk.
So she's marching a big army through his lands, and she's heading straight towards him, you know?
Yeah.
And he starts to panic. Oh man, oh no way, oh I gotta get this Maeve, like, you know, she's always had her eyes on my cows. So he starts to head down the wall, and he's heading down the wall, and okay, and he's down, and he starts to go across the courtyard, and oh jeez, he's out of wind. You gotta stop again like this. Jeez. Oh my god, and he's hustling like over to the garrison.
Uh-huh.
And he gets into the garrison, and there's all his men, and they're also having difficulty breathing. They're all like this.
Ooh.
And some of them are lying on the ground moaning because the men of Ulster are in labour.
No way!
Mm-hmm. They have been struck down with labour.
Wow.
As per the curse.
Yes.
So the crack is...
That's what you get.
There's only one guy in the whole of Ulster that's not been struck down with this, and it's a guy called Chulainn.
Uh-huh.
And like, he's really Ireland's most famous kind of...
Yeah, I was going to say, he's pretty famous.
Yeah, he's a famous hero. He used to be called Satanta. He's the son of a god. You know, that's why he's not struck down, because he's only half Ulster, he's half god. Oh. The gods, you'll remember, are the two of the Donna.
Yes.
Yeah, because they're the magical guys. So he's struck down with this. So Chulainn goes, oh my god, these men of Ulster are useless. I'm going to have to take care of this myself. So he puts on his armour, and he picks up his trusty spear.
Okay.
And he marches out to meet the men of Connacht.
Okay.
As they're heading towards him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So the men of Connacht, anyway, are heading towards Vaca. And they're going to get these bulls.
Yeah.
It's about maybe another day or two till they get there. So they stop for the night, and they set up a camp. Mm-hmm. And they light fires, and they get out their provisions, and they start eating them. You know?
Yeah.
So then, into the light of one of these campfires walks this beautiful fair-haired woman, you know? Mm-hmm. And she walks in with her kind of big black cloak on. Mm-hmm. And she takes off her cloak, and they're all like, wow.
She's hot.
What a smoke show, you know? And they say, why don't you come down here and sit by the fire, you know? So she comes down and she sits by the fire.
Yeah.
And they say, do you want a glass of mead? Here's a glass of mead. And she starts drinking a glass of mead. Mm-hmm. And then they say, look, here's a giant hunk of meat. Do you want to gnaw on that for a bit? Mm. So she starts gnawing on the giant hunk of meat and drinking the mead. Mm-hmm. And she's saying to the lads,
It's a great welcome.
you're the minute Connacht, like, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you guys are tops. Like, excellent. Do you know who you're way better than? You're way better than the men of Ulster.
Yup.
The men of Ulster are coming for you. They're closer than you think. Do you see that fire over there on that hilltop?
Oh.
That's the men of Ulster camped out.
Did you not notice them there, lads?
Yeah, sneaking up on you, those sneaky men of Ulster. Do you know?
Yeah.
This is really good meat, by the way. Where is this? And they're like, that's goat. She's like, this is very nice. Thank you.
So tender.
So that's it. Up she gets and walks off. And the lads are like, the men of Ulster right over there. Fucking hell. So they suit up real slow, you know? They get out their swords and off they go over to that other campfire to fight the men of Ulster. So the next day, Chulainn is starting to still riding out, you know?
Yeah.
And he's riding out up the side of this hill. And you can see these crows swirling around. Hundreds of crows, thousands of them. Swirling around and swooping and diving.
Yeah.
And he comes up over the crest of the hill. And there are hundreds of Connacht men dead. Everywhere. Fire still smouldering. And crows swirling around and cawing and pecking at the eyeballs of fallen Connacht men and
Great image.
pulling
Thanks.
their entrails out.
Oh, lovely.
And Chulainn keeps looking. And he can't see anybody other than dead Connacht men. All over this battlefield.
Okay.
It's like they fought each other.
No.
And there,
Yeah.
standing in the middle of the battlefield,
Is that sexy lady?
no, is a black-haired lady.
Oh.
And the crows are swirling around him. Swirling around her, all around her. And her hands are all dirty.
Ew.
And she just stands there. And her gaze follows him as he rides through the carnage, you know.
Yeah.
And he's a little bit freaked out.
Just a little.
Yeah. And she just stands there about 100 meters away from him in the middle of all this death. Dirty hands on her. Hair buffeted by the wind and the crows swirling around her. And she just follows him off the battlefield.
Oh.
And he goes down the hill and he has a little shiver. Ooh. That's a little bit freaky. And he starts to ride down the hill and he gets to the edge of a river.
Okay.
And he starts to follow the river along. Oh my God. There is that crazy black-haired one again. And now she's standing in the river up to her waist in water. And she's washing the blood out of a load of armour.
Oh.
And the river is running red from where she's washing it. It's flowing down the river.
Creepy.
Yeah. So, you know, that kind of freaks him out a little bit.
Little, yeah.
So he keeps riding on down the river because he knows that the men of Connacht are at a ford, you know? Do you know what I mean by ford?
Like a fork in a river?
It's a bridging point in a river.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the lowest bridging point in a river is a ford.
Like where the water is the shallowest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you can ride your horse across it in a western.
Okay.
So he gets down to the ford, you know, and the men of Connacht are on one side, and he sets up his camp, and he grabs his spear and he walks down into the middle of the ford, and then Maeve comes out to meet him, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm here to stop you taking the cows. What do you think?" And she's like, "You and whose army?" And he said, "Just me." And then he says, "But I demand the right of single combat," you know? So that's how it starts.
Is single combat not usually the thing?
Maeve starts with single combat and then she starts sending lots of guys in after him.
Oh, right.
You know, in sets of 2s or 3s. But yeah, generally. So he stands in the ford all day long with his spear.
Okay.
Stabbing guys. And then another guy will come out and he'll fight him and he'll stab him.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And he's in the ford and he's fighting. And about on the 3rd or 4th day, he's up in his camp, you know. So his day basically goes like this. He puts on his gear, he walks down to the ford, and he gets busy stabbing. And then he goes back up to the tent.
For the sake of the cows.
He goes back up to the tent. He tries to relax a little bit, does a bit of Sudoku, I suppose, and, patches up his wounds. And then off down again early in the morning for another day of stabbing. So after a couple of days of this, like, this beautiful fair-haired woman shows up at his tent.
Oh.
Yeah. And she says, I've been watching you murder these lads. Mm-hmm. And you are pretty fit. Takes a high level of fitness to go murdering like that. Pretty fit myself. See this spear? And she does. She has a massive spear.
Okay.
She goes, I'm pretty handy with the spear. Pretty handy in the sack as well, if you know what I mean.
Oh my god.
So why don't the two of us comfort each other in the night, and then the next day we'll go down there and start murderating Connacht's men.
Murderate.
And Cuchulainn says, no, I don't think we're going to do that. I find that making love before murdering people steals some of my vigor.
Oh.
And I want to, like, it's like this. You need to tap into a well source of hate to go down there and make that fjord run red with blood.
Right.
And if we have love, you're kind of counteracting my hate,
Yeah, it's kind of...
And she says, I think you're making the wrong decision.
Oh.
And he says, well, that's just the decision I've made. So off she goes. So the next day, he gets up and he picks up his spear and he puts on his armour and he goes walking down to the fjord for another day of stabbing.
Yeah.
And as he's walking across the fjord, suddenly this eel swims up to him and wraps itself around his leg and trips him into the fjord.
Uh-oh.
And he falls into the water. And as he's getting up, the eel jumps out of the water and transforms into a wolf. And it
okay.
And it runs up the field and starts a cattle stampede into the fjord. So he's there on his knees with his spear, and there's this big stampede of cattle running towards him. So he's like, holy hell. So he gets up and he starts flaying around with the spear, yeah?
Yeah.
And the cattle they're like, this isn't like an ordinary stampede. They stampede past him and then they turn around and they come back. And there's this one heifer at the front of the pile of cows,
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, that's the lead heifer. I'm going to take that out,
Yeah.
So he jumps up, he gives it a whack with his spear, and he breaks its ribs. And then he jumps up on its back and pokes its eye out.
Ew.
Its right eye out.
Okay.
And then he jumps off again and smashes its leg.
Oh.
Its back leg with his spear.
Very violent.
Yeah, and the heifer and the other cows limp off.
Okay.
And he sets about murdering people. So that's the next day then, when he's finished murdering people that day, yeah?
Yeah.
He starts to head back to his camp.
Okay.
And on his way back there, he meets this old lady and she's milking a cow. And this old lady now is missing her right eye. And her ribs are broken.
And her leg is
and
smashed.
her leg is smashed.
Oh.
And she says, I'll give you a drink if you bless me. And he said, okay, fair enough. So she, straight out of the cow, fresh as you like, into a glass. And she hands him the glass of milk. And he takes a sup of the glass of milk. And he says, while he's drinking it, he blesses her, Okay. Well, thank you for this glass of milk. And, I wish you good health while I'm drinking it. And her eye suddenly reappears. And then she gives him another glass of milk. And he drinks that. And he says, bless you for this glass of milk. You're great altogether. And her ribs get healed. And then she drinks it the third time. And her leg gets healed.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, she's the black-haired lady from the battlefield. The one that was washing the armour.
Yeah.
And he realises, this is the Morrigan. The whole time I've been dealing with the Morrigan.
Yes.
So...
And she's a member of the Tuatha.
She is a member of the Tuatha, and she's the Tuatha goddess of battle and fate. So she's got the 3 faces there, like Macha, who's like the regenerative power, like the birth, you know? And then there's Nemain, who's like the spirit of confusion and stuff like that. Like when she appears, she's not what she appears to be, you know?
Okay, yeah.
And then there's the most famous one is Bav, and Bav is the one that appears on the battleground and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's the one that you think of when you hear the word Morrigan.
She's the one you think of when you hear the word Morrigan, yeah. They're all represented by crows. She's called the battle crow, and her call will confuse people in battle. They call a battlefield the Garden of Bav, you know, where she grows corpses, like. Bav is also the manifestation of the goddess that's responsible for prophecy. So she says, this is not going to end well for you, buddy. You know, you should have laid down with me and fought with me that time.
Yeah.
But now you've forsaken me. This is not going to end well for you. If I were you, I'd pack my gear up, forget about Connor's cows, and get the hell out of here. And then he says, nope, I don't think I'll be doing that. So off he goes back to his tent.
This is still Chulainn, yeah?
This is still Chulainn, yeah. Off he goes back to his tent.
Cheeky man.
Yeah.
Because he knows that he is half Tuatha.
Yeah, I mean, she's this fearsome kind of character, and she's probably most famous now of all of the Celtic Trinity goddesses, you know. She's probably most famous because Wiccans really go for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's kind of carried on like that. So just to finish up, there's loads of battles and there's loads of stories of her, you know, swinging battles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've stripped a lot of those out because the names are confusing and context is confusing and stuff like that, you know?
Yes.
But suffice it to say, if she shows up and talks to you probably, and you tell her you don't want to do business, then she will murder you. Like, everybody's going to die. If she shows up, everybody dies, is basically the rule, you know?
Right. And there's no way to get back on her good side.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to
tell.
It's hard to tell, like, with a lot of these tales, like a lot of the motivations that people have would have made sense 2,000 years ago, but
right.
You know, it's hard to make out what's going on now, like. So just to talk about the death of Chulainn, like, so Chulainn goes down to the fjord again and he starts murdering.
Okay. Yeah.
And then and then they start to send out people that Chulainn knows against him. You know?
Oh, no.
They send out his friend Ferdia, and they send out who's the son of Maeve, you know? And they send out his foster father and stuff like that against him, you know? And then he kills them all.
Right.
And the men of Connacht, they're starting to panic. Yeah?
Right.
This guy is unkillable. He just will not die.
Yeah.
So at the end of one of the battles, he takes himself up to the top of the hill, you know? And he's been very badly injured. So he takes out his intestines and ties himself to a tree.
Ew.
And he stands there supporting himself on the spear with his intestines
Wait,
out.
hold on, stop. Because once you said intestines, like, my brain just shut down. Why did he pull out his intestines?
To tie himself to a tree. Because if he fell down, the men of Connacht would attack. So if it looks like he's standing, so he's using the intestines to support himself.
Ew. Hang on, how is this going to end well? Either way, he's gonna die, right?
It ends fine, like for a few,
Really?
yeah, for a few days, for a few. Well, I don't know if it's days to be honest, like, but for quite some time, the Minnaconics stand on the other side of the fjord, looking at him, going, "You go first." No, no, you go. I'm right behind you. Do you know? I would, but I just had a heavy lunch, and you know,
I think I need to go for a lie.
I might go for a lie down. So they're watching him for ages, and he won't. Do you know, he's not going down. And then a raven or a crow lands on his shoulder and starts pecking at him.
Yeah.
And then they know that he's dead, and on they come. And that's
gross.
That's the end of that. Now,
but he bought them time. Is that what he was doing?
He bought them time, yeah. Yeah, he did, yeah. And kind of like the...
Did it work out in the end? I mean, like...
yeah, it does and it doesn't. It's
these stories kind of like... They kind of like roll into each other and there's no ending.
There's no ending.
It like such... just moves into another legend, like... It goes from one myth to the next, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's, I mean, like, it's not even Conor McNassa's cows that she wants. Like, it's a different guy, but he's under Conor's protection, and it's the
whole thing.
Yeah. So that's the crack. So this is this goddess anyway.
Yes.
The Morrigan, like the goddess of war, prophecy, death and rebirth within narrow contexts, you know. Mm-hmm. Fate, she's the goddess of that as well.
Yes.
Now, Maeve is the queen of Connacht.
Yep.
And the seat of Connacht is a place called Rathcorgan.
Rathcorgan.
Yeah, and that's where you'll find this thing called Aon na Gata, which is the cave of the cats. Yeah. And I actually have a photo of it if you want to have a look. So you can see the cat there for scale. It's not very big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now what Aon na Gata is it's a souterrain. So a souterrain it's a thing definitely in Ireland. I'm sure they build them other places as well. But it's a hole in the ground or it's a hole in the wall or something like this. Mm-hmm. And it was basically like 2,000-year-old refrigeration. So this is where you would keep stuff that you wanted to stay cold.
Yes.
Yeah. In this case, it's a limestone cave that they've built a front onto.
Okay.
And it used to, in the past, this has been removed now, but in the past, there used to be a earthen bank around it. So presumably it would have been inside in someone's house. And it's quite big. There's a lot of places for storage. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, the thing about Rathcorgan is that it's a huge like archaeological landscape in Ireland. It's one of the 6 royal houses or royal complexes, you know. Mm-hmm. There's like almost 250 archaeological remains in the area, and they date from like the Neolithic all the way through to the kind of Bronze Age and stuff like that.
Okay.
You know,
yeah.
I think there might even be some monastic stuff there as well. Mm-hmm. Now, this cave on the Gata, this is the home of the Morrigan. This is where she lives.
Ah.
Yeah. And there's all these stories like the Morrigan would live in there, but you would never see her. And every day at dawn, she would let out her cattle to graze. Mm-hmm. And then at night, she would whistle and the cattle would come back into the cave, you know? Mm. There's a story about one woman who wanted to...
Are these teeny tiny itty bitty cows?
It's kind of magical, like a
portal.
It's kind of magical, like there's one story about this one lady.
She has a shrink ray.
There's one story about this one lady who wanted to try and grab one of the cattle, you know.
Yeah.
So as the heifer was heading back into the cave, she caught hold of its neck, and it basically charged into the cave and ran her through this massive cave system and came out in Sligo, about 120 miles away.
Wow.
So that's one of the legends about it. I suppose before we go any further though, we should probably talk about this other thing that happened.
Okay.
So Amergin and the sons of Mill, the Miletians, they start to go roaming up and down the country fighting the two of the Danann for control of the country, you know?
Right.
And on the whole, they are successful. And in the end, they named the country after Eru,
Yes.
which over time becomes Erin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other names like Bamba and Futla are often used artistically to refer to Ireland.
Okay.
Like the way sometimes people would use Alba for Scotland, you know. So these women, these goddesses, really from the Tuatha Dé Danann that saw the magic dying and took the side of the Miletians. Turned out they were right. There's a big battle, you know, and in the end, it becomes clear that the Tuatha Dé Danann are going to lose, but there's going to be great losses on both sides.
Okay.
So your friend and mine, Morrigan,
Yep.
meets them and makes a deal, because that's what he does. He fights with his brain.
Right, that's his job.
Yeah. So he meets the Tuatha Dé Danann and they say, oh, well, this country was all of ours, you know? And then he says, well, it's our country now.
Colonizer.
But you know what? Let's split this country in two.
Okay.
So men will have everything above the ground. And the Tuatha Dé Danann will have everything below the ground.
That makes sense.
So then the Tuatha Dé Danann use their magic
Yeah.
to disguise themselves. And they go and live in the mountains, and they go and live underground and stuff like this.
Yes.
And the Tuatha Dé Danann become the Sidhe. And the Sidhe are where we get stuff like Banshee. Literally means she-woman, you know? We also get leprechauns.
Yes.
All of these magical fairy creatures are the Sidhe. And they're the remnants of the Tuatha Dé Danann. So they can still affect the lives of men, but not in this godly
They're the
kind of
ones
way.
that got caught.
Yeah. So now you've got the two worlds. You've got the land above, which is the land of men. And then you've got the land below, which is called... there's a lot of different names for it. Like, Tir na Nog is probably the most popular name for it. And Tir na Nog means the land of youth,
Yes.
you know?
Out in belly.
I've actually made... I'm not going to do the Irish for it because it'll just be confusing, like, but I've actually got... So, other than Tir na Nog, there's the land of youth, obviously. Then there's the land of promise is another name for it. The land of apple trees, or sometimes called the multicoloured place.
Ooh.
And it's basically where the magic lives.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So, the Morrigan lives in this cave. And that cave is one of only 3 portals in Ireland where you can readily get from our land to the land of the Sidhe.
Okay.
There's this creature, and I'm not even joking here, called the Ellen Trenchend.
Ellen.
Well, there's a fad on it, so it's Elan.
Okay.
But honestly, Ellen, the Ellen Trenchend, you know? And it's this 3-headed bird, you know? I picture it like a 3-headed griffin kind of character, you know?
Yeah.
And it comes charging out of the cave. And it's flying around Ireland, laying waste to the place. Yeah?
Ooh, yeah.
And it's tearing up things, coming down, plucking cattle out of the ground, you know?
Yeah.
Eating them like an apple on the hop, like busy with the destruction. And it flies all around Ireland, killing loads of stuff. And then eventually it gets defeated by your friend and mine, Morrigan.
Oh, I didn't think he'd fought.
I don't know how. I googled hard and I couldn't find any detailed legends about this, right?
Okay.
So
He just decided to fight that day.
yeah, and so the crack with this is that Samhain is actually the Celtic New Year, you know.
Yeah.
And they started as a Celtic. They started as a Celtic New Year because it's when all of these creatures, when the veil between our world and the next world is at its thinnest, you know. And from these portals, like this Al Nagata, these creatures come out and they ravage the landscape. So where trees were bountiful and fruitful and full of leaves,
Yes.
but by the end of this period, they'll be bare and barren and everything will be cold, you know? They're led by this Ellen Trenchend, you know?
Yeah.
But also, they're also, hang on now, I got it written down here.
The notes.
Yeah, my wonderful notes. Yeah, so every year on Halloween, yeah,
Yeah.
the Ellen Trenchant comes out, and it's also accompanied by a flock of saffron-colored birds and a horde of pigs who multiply each time they are counted and eat everything in sight. So the Trenchant, these saffron birds, and these ever-multiplying pigs, they come out and they bring winter with them.
Okay.
That's the story. They come out and they bring winter with them.
So never count your pigs.
Never count your pigs, because every time you count them, there'll be more of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the story. They come out. There's other legends associated with it as well.
Uh-huh.
There's one like the Adventures of Nara.
Nara, where have I heard that before?
This is actually kind of interesting, and because let's just pretend this is trick or treating. It's a really hard legend to try and understand, you know.
Yeah.
So they're at a feast, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and Alwyn, like who's Maeve's husband, legendary king, and queen.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the other thing as well is that if you want to look at kind of Celtic society, if there's a marriage, whoever has the most land and wealth, they're the head of the household.
Yeah.
So that can be a man or a woman,
Okay.
And people make much ado about it as well, about these Brehon laws, again, that were written down, in the early monastic period and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because divorce is fine. Like, there is a number of strictures where you can divorce your husband or your partner, for laziness, for being too fat, for being unable to consummate a marriage. All of these things are grounds for divorce, And they hold it up as like, oh, there was more equality or whatever, but I don't know if that's true either. I mean, they also would have had,
There's quite a bit of violence there.
I think
as well.
there's a lot of violence in this culture. So what am I trying to? Oh yeah, so the story is like that he's there, Alwyn,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, do you see those 3 guys that I just hung yesterday? If any of you can offer them a drink of water and get them to drink the water, then I'll give you a great prize. So Nora gets up and says, okay, I'll give it a shot. So he ties a rope around the guy's leg and he pulls him out of the castle.
Okay.
And he pulls him down the road to the first house he comes across. Mm-hmm. But this house is surrounded by a moat of water.
Naturally.
And he says to the dead guy, well, we'll not get in here. And the dead guy says something along the lines of, well...
The dead guy speaks?
Yeah, they've got a pot for water and a pot for washing and a pot for slopping out. So he goes, yeah, well, either way, there's water all around it. We're not going to get it.
Uh-huh.
So then he pulls him down to the next house with the rope around his leg. They get to the next house, and the next house is surrounded by a lake of fire. And he goes, I don't know if we're going to get water here either, to the dead guy. And the dead guy goes, well, he goes, they've got a pot for water for drinking and a pot for washing and a pot for slopping out. But I don't think we'll get any water here on account of the flames,
Okay.
And then they go on to the third place, and lo and behold, it's okay, and they can get in the door.
Huh.
And they get in the door, and they drink water from each of the containers.
Ew.
The one for drinking, the one for washing, and the one for slopping out. And then Nara tells them that every night before you go to bed, you got to take the slopping out bucket out of the house. Don't leave the poo and the pee in the house. Also, bathe regularly, and hydration is important. And then they go back, and honestly, it's really hard to understand what's going on in this legend,
Yeah.
But basically, he ends up going into the Aulmagata, like into the cave of the cat.
Uh-huh.
And he has loads of adventures, marries a fairy princess, the whole lot. Like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thumbelina.
Yeah. So that's essentially what it is. And the Samhain then is like it would have traditionally kind of been celebrated with bonfires and stuff like that,
Yeah.
And the bonfires are to keep the spirits away. And it's when these two worlds are close to each other like this, a conjunction of the spheres, if you will, you know, from The Witcher or whatever. When that happens, people would disguise themselves as creatures from the underworld so that they weren't taken, and you know,
of course,
when all of this stuff started happening,
right?
Yeah, and that's kind of where it comes from. So it's this thing between the two worlds, and then Irish immigrants would have brought it to the States in the 19th century.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's about the size of it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, James, for sharing some stories related to, the legend of Samhain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the myth, the legend, the story, the truth. The truth.
The truth about Samhain.
We really appreciate.
I suppose the other thing is like that they call
it's not over.
They call this cave Aun Nagata, you know.
Yeah.
And then of course Oscailga Cat is cat, and then got is the genitive version of it, you know. But the actual, like, a lot of this was pulpy stuff, but I did read some doctors on this as well, you know. And they think that the etymology of the cave comes from Koth, which would be like a battle. So it's actually the cave of the battle.
Oh.
Is the actual thing.
Are you sure it's battle and not cattle?
Ah!
Right. So thank you all so much for joining us and watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. It's always fun filming with you, darling.
Thank you.
If you have any questions or would like to leave us a comment, we love reading them, so please leave a comment down below. Before you head out, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up. It helps me, or thumbs down, whatever you want. And subscribe to get more diamond painting related videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, everybody!
Bye!
Bye!